Habit or routine, which matters more, and why picking the right one makes a difference when you're trying to make a change. What's up, guys? Jonathan here. Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. We're going to talk about habit or routine, which one matters more when you're trying to make a change in your life. Now, this is actually one of the 10 lessons that I've learned from 10 years of coaching. I just sold my gym, and I've been reflecting on the 10 years I spent coaching and what are the biggest lessons I've learned, and this is the number one lesson. So, habit or routine. When we look at making a change, we're usually looking at outcomes, right? Like, what is our current situation? What is our body weight? How do we look? How do we feel? What type of success are we having in certain areas? What are our health levels, whether that's physical or relational or social or whatever? We're looking at outcomes, right? And so when we look at outcomes, we need to be able to draw lines back to see what brought us to those outcomes. When people look at a change, right, they realize that what they're currently doing is probably not working. And that's, when I do sales calls, like that's one of the main things is to understand what are you doing right now? Where has that gotten you? And then understanding what we would need to do differently. Now, here's the biggest thing though, when it comes to like personal change is whenever someone would come to a gym appointment with me, an intro appointment to sit down and learn more about, specifically we did CrossFit. They really wanted to know about the routine. They want to know about like what the training program consists of. Like, what do we do in CrossFit? Like, what type of exercise? What do classes look like? How are they structured? All that type of stuff. And they're thinking about the routine. So when you look at a routine, that's like the thing that you actually do, the actual behaviors that would lead to a different outcome. So when you're doing the thing itself. So in this case, someone's not training, they're not exercising, so they're interested in the exercise routine. This is how people observe most comparisons for exercise. They're comparing CrossFit versus Orange Theory versus a boot camp versus strength training versus just whatever it is, right? And they're wondering, hey, what is this routine comprised of, this exercise regimen, right? But as I dug deeper, whenever I would be talking to somebody, what I would realize is like they're concerned about the routine, but when you really observe their life, they have a problem that's not the routine of exercise, it's the habit of showing up. So like they're coming in thinking, hey, I need to understand the routine, but really they've never been consistent in any routine and they don't have evidence to show that the routine even matters that much. So really what they need to be focused on is the habit loop, which this is, that's a cardinal hitting the window up there if you heard that pecking. This is Charles Duhigg, Power of Habit. So any habit, you have a cue, a routine, and a reward. James Clear talks about this also. So like, they would be concerned about what the exercise program was comprised of, but their real problem is they don't show up regularly. So what's the cue that leads the routine? So we would start here and we would talk about, hey, okay, what days of the week are you going to come? Okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What time? Okay, 5 p.m. When are you going to start? Let's say it was a Monday. We would start on Wednesday, right? That's the cue that leads to the routine. So over here is, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 p.m. Right here is CrossFit, okay? So you can see how if your focus is on choosing all the routines, you never actually address the behavior problem that lies behind the execution of the routine. So if you never show up, routine doesn't really matter. Actually, that's kind of the point here is if you focus on routine, and you never address like, well, what's my showing up factor? Like, what's the actual cueing of this thing? Am I even making it there? Am I even doing it enough to get the evidence out of it that it works? Then you're actually focusing on the wrong thing. So the habit matters more than the routine. So defining what the habit is and executing it, and we would always have a lot of success because another piece of this would be, people would think they need to show up 5 or 6 days a week, and we're like, no, just 3 days a week. That's it. And they're like, really? And we're like, yeah, like let's make it easy because if we reinforce showing up 3 days a week, then the routine will work itself out, right? And the reward I have found typically always works itself out because you can always say that, I want this desired outcome, right? Okay, and then you can draw backwards of what routines lead to the desired outcome. Like that's a pretty easy thing. There's books all about that. People post, little short form stuff. Like they're like habit hacks or, whatever. And they're like, hey, if you want to do this thing, right? If you want to have, it's really bad on Instagram and TikTok. Like if you want to have this type of muscular development, do this exercise, right? That's saying, if you want this outcome, do this routine, but no one really gets to the cue part, like the habit part of what habits set up that routine that lead to the reward. It's the people that focus on these things right here that lead to long-term outcomes. So like, in sales, like outbound dials or, training, reviewing video, okay, of calls, like those things improve the routine, but if you don't do this, you don't have a better routine anyway. So if you're not doing certain things, you don't really get the desired outcome, right? So when it comes to who has more success in any endeavor, it's always going to be the person that focuses on habit. It's always going to be the first person that focuses on the cueing, the lead up, the initiation. And that's why, like for me personally, I'm not like, I like to optimize, but I don't like to optimize until I get this part right. I don't like to like make everything perfect or make everything as best as it could be if I don't have the right thing going on the front end. Because you can optimize for a routine, but if you don't show up for it, it doesn't really matter, right? So in the physical fitness world, like if you're struggling with your fitness, you're probably focused on which routine is going to be the best for me, as opposed to being like, hey, like, what's the habit? Like, what's the actual habit? It's not a routine, actually. The habit doesn't really matter. The routine doesn't matter until you build this. So yeah, there are routines that are better, but unless you're showing up regular to those routines. So like if you just go to the Globo gym and you just do a couple circuits on their, machines, like that's cool. But if you do it 3 days a week and you do that for 3 months, then you want to change routines, you'll get more out of that routine because you show up regularly. And this is the same for everything, man. It can be anything. I always talk about sobriety, I talk about sales, I talk about progress, I talk about change. Just if you find yourself saying, what's the thing I should do? You're probably better off being like, what's the habit behind it? Like any routine needs a certain type of input. What's the input? How do you show up for that input? How do you mark that off on your calendar? Make it happen consistently, like hold yourself accountable to this. Then this creates this. So be wary of always focusing on routine. The habit matters more. Awesome, guys. Thanks for another good Whiteboard Wednesday. I'll see you later.